Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is James, the creator of the Raven of the Scythe fantasy role-playing game. If you haven't already, you can check out Raven of the Scythe. It's available for free right now at drivethrurpg.com. Just search for Raven of the Scythe. So, today we are going to talk about Sandbox style adventuring and how, at least this is kind of the methods and best practices that I have come up with over the years to allow the players as much agency in their adventuring as I can think of, while at the same time making the world seem alive and vibrant and also living independently of the players and their actions and what they choose to do. So, one of the first things that I started implementing whenever I started going for this type of adventure writing is something that we call the town board or the adventure board or whatever. It can come in many, many different forms, whatever works for your game. And what I mean by this is a few days before each adventure or each game session, I try to send the players sort of a mass text or something like that, a Facebook message, whatever works for the group that I'm playing with, that just sort of outlines what's going on in the town, what adventures are available, and I try to include anywhere from 3 to 5 different adventure hooks, and then let the players decide amongst themselves which ones they are interested in. And this could be anything from like a literal town board that shows up like in the center of the town and you go and you see what's on there, or it could come in the form of, I've used newspapers before in Call of Cthulhu games and stuff like that. All the way down to just like, this is what the local gossip on the street is, you know? And not everything on here is necessarily an adventure hook. It could also just be things happening in the town or, you know, upcoming events and stuff like that. Stuff that I try to use to incorporate world building, just to give the players an idea of what's happening. For instance, if there's a local holiday coming up or a festival or anything like that that's going on, this makes a good place to let the players know that. So, once the players have selected the adventure that they want to go on, then I can craft the adventure based on that. But just because the players choose a particular option doesn't mean that the other options just disappear. Because what I'm trying to do with this is make the world seem alive and vibrant and living independently of the players. So, for instance, if, say, one of the quests on the adventure board was that there's a monster in the forest and the town's offering a reward for the death or the capture of this particular monster. Well, maybe the players don't feel like going and hunting this monster. Maybe they want to go explore the local cave system that supposedly has treasure in it. So the players are like, yes, we definitely want to go on this treasure hunt in the caves. But in doing that, they have to go through the forest where the monster is. So what I will do is include the monster on random encounter charts that I use for the overland portion of the game while the players are going through the forest. So until that monster is dealt with, the monster is still a threat to the players because it might just show up in the middle of another adventure. Another thing that can happen is that, say, the local community is like the roads are just thick with bandits, or maybe there's pirates operating off the coast or something like that. So, until that threat is dealt with, the price of goods in the community is going to be elevated by a certain percentage. Not so much that it becomes impossible for the players to resupply or anything like that, but that it's a noticeable amount. As a rule of thumb, I tend to use a 50% increase in the cost of goods for cases like this. So that way, the players, they're not, just left out in the cold, but they also kind of feel the pinch like, this sucks, And one of the things that this does, at least in my experience, is that it makes these villains seem more personal to the adventurers, because you always want your villains and your big bads to have a personal relationship with the players. And even if, the bandit leader or whatever isn't personally attacking the players are still negatively affected by them through the increased cost of goods. And this results in the players feeling like they are personally attacked. Like it could be sessions before the players go off to actually deal with the bandit or whatever. But they have suffered every time they went to buy new equipment because of that villain. And the players take that personally. So whenever they go and actually confront this threat to end this condition or claim their reward or whatever, they already have some built up antagonism toward this villain. And, or they're finally willing to go and put an end to the monster threat because they're tired of sneaking around and having to hide from this thing every time they walk outside the village. Or, maybe this was the monster that just randomly attacked them one night when they weren't prepared. So now they already have a personal grief with this particular monster and they're wanting to get to the bottom of it. It can, in some cases, result in the players, like in the case of the monster showing up on the random encounter charts, it can result in the players winning. Like, they could be on their way to the caves to hunt for the treasure when the monster shows up and they kill it. Which, I'm the type of GM that I just kind of let the dice fall where they may, and if the players end up taking out this monster before, the quote-unquote quest part where they were supposed to, then, yeah, I'm totally cool with just saying, like, yeah, you killed the monster. Like, now, not only can you go and explore the caves and look for treasure like you wanted to, but you can also claim the reward for defeating this named monster. That quest doesn't necessarily end, though, because presumably the monster still has a lair somewhere, and that lair is still going to be, containing whatever treasure the monster had managed to accumulate. So even after the monster is dead, the players might want to go and try to find the creature's lair just to look for the treasure and stuff. Another way that you can incorporate random encounter charts with stuff like this is maybe, rather than the creature themselves, maybe they encounter signs of the creature. So if it's a particularly nasty monster or something like that, like, let's say it's a wyvern or a manticore or something like that, maybe they just see it fly overhead and the players will need to make stealth checks or something like that to hide. Maybe it's not even interested in them. Or maybe they find remains of some of its previous victims. Something that emphasizes that this thing is still active in the world and is still a threat to you, but you're not going to deal with it just yet. In the case of like bandits or something like that, even if the players don't want to confront the bandit leader, if the roads are, just thick with bandits, then bandits should be showing up on the random encounters. So until the players deal with the bandit lord or whatever, then they are still going to be feeling the effects of this guy's activity. Not only in the increased prices of goods, but because the roadways aren't safe because of the bandits that keep popping up on the random encounter tables. Whenever it comes to the board itself, the adventures, those things don't necessarily stay on there forever. One of the things that I like to do is, because if the players aren't necessarily interested at all in a certain story arc, then I don't necessarily want to just keep beating them over the head with it. It's not like they're under any obligation to go do anything for that matter. And I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm kind of railroading them toward a particular adventure that they're not interested in. So let's say that the players, they have no interest whatsoever in going to explore those caves and finding the treasure. So I will tend to leave things on the town board for 2 or 3 sessions, and then I'll just remove it. Maybe there is another group in the town or community or whatever that comes in, and they complete that quest for the players. And so now you have this other adventuring party that's active in the area, and maybe they're all really cool guys. Like maybe, the players and this other group of adventurers can come together and share stories of their various adventures and have a sort of shared camaraderie and stuff like that. Or maybe this other group of adventurers are kind of a bunch of jerks, and they kind of go out of their way to rub it in the player's face, like, look at this cool treasure we got from the cave, like, you didn't go on this quest, but we did, and now we have this sick magic sword and all this money, and we're buying all this cool stuff with it. Or maybe while the players were out trying to hunt down these stupid bandits, this other group goes off and defeats the monster, and now the town's like, oh, these are our heroes, and they're like having parties for them and like building statues up in their honor and stuff like that. Like, depending on the personalities of the adventuring groups, this can really be a fun source of conflict for the game. Like, so maybe at some point after this other group has been established, maybe both parties end up after the same quest, or they're both trying to complete the same thing, and they're either going to end up working together to try to overcome a greater threat, or they're going to end up getting in each other's way and trying to hamper each other's efforts, because each group wants to be the one that completes it and gets the prize at the end. Or maybe one group decides to just hang back and let the other group actually complete the quest, and then their plan is to just jump them afterwards and take the loot or whatever it was in question. And that's one way to get quests off of the town board. Another way is that you can have things escalate. So for instance, let's say at the edge of town there is a mausoleum that has got an undead problem. There's a undead thing that zombies and skeletons are starting to show up, and no one knows exactly why. So the town's like, hey, we want investigators to go scope out this crypt, and see what's going on down there. But the players aren't really interested in that. Like, they don't care about the undead. They don't care about the crypt or anything like that. They want to go hunt down monsters and fight bandits. So then a couple of games from then, you let the players know, be like, hey, so it turns out that a powerful undead wizard has risen from his crypt and is commanding an army of the undead, and now he has taken control of the ruined cathedral at the edge of town, and now it's a undead fortress. Well, the players aren't interested in that because there's these caves and they want to go look for treasure. So, you run the game where the players go and hunt for their treasure, and now you can start including things like undead on your random encounter charts, and maybe even have a few scripted encounters with undead, just to emphasize to the players, hey, this problem is getting worse. Maybe you should go deal with it. But then the crypt doesn't get dealt with because the players were off looking for treasure. And you can, the next time the town board comes up, you can tell the players, be like, hey, in the next town over, there has been sightings of this kind of monster, and they really want someone to go deal with it. Or there's a merchant caravan that really wants someone to escort them through this dangerous canyon to go to this next town over, or whatever. Because you can also use these town boards as a way to let the players leave. Like, they can always decide, like, hey, we'd rather go over here, we'd rather follow this quest somewhere else. But if they choose to stay there, well, at this point, maybe this undead wizard has gathered enough of his strength that now the undead are attacking the town, and maybe NPCs that the players are used to interacting with and maybe buying things from and establishments, those places are under threat now, because now the undead wizard isn't just resurrecting like zombies and skeletons and stuff, but he's starting to animate very powerful undead monsters that he's sending out against the town and stuff like that. And of course, the players are under no obligation to deal with this threat. They can always, like, jump ship and head somewhere else. Maybe one of the quests is a wealthy town elder or something like that is like, no, this place is too dangerous. I want out of here, and I'm going to hire the players to take me someplace safe. And they can totally do that. But if they let the situation go, they're essentially losing this town. Like, this town is going to be lost, and they're not going to have access to the goods and supplies and resources that this town offered until that undead threat is dealt with. And maybe the players don't want to do that. Maybe they're just not interested. And that's fine. So you can kind of naturally let situations like that escalate to emphasize that, hey, things are still going on, but that's not necessarily your problem unless you want it to be. Another thing that you can do with this style of gaming is sort of have advancing adventure lines or storylines or whatever going on through the various entries on the town board. So let's say the players went off and they fought the bandit. Okay, that's fine. But they discover that the bandit, the guy in charge, the leader, maybe he was really, I don't know, let's say he was working reluctantly for the undead wizard that had resurrected and was using the bandit to bring him money and supplies and stuff like that. Or maybe just bodies. Maybe the bandits were collecting bodies to bring to the wizard so that he could animate. So this way, these two different adventures that seemed completely unrelated now are. So if the players went the bandit route, they might get a hint that something's going on under the cathedral before that storyline necessarily pops up on the town board. Now, or let's say the players go through and explore the caves, but they find that those caves connect to an underground dungeon that seems to have rather bizarre, draconic kind of flavors to it. Like maybe like lesser dragons or dragon eggs start showing up. And so the next time the players get the message from the Chantry board or the town board or whatever you want to call it, now they have the option to investigate where these bandits were taking the bodies, or they can investigate further, like what's in this dungeon that was under the caves, or they could go out in the woods and try to hunt down the monster. There's a lot of cool ways that you can include this type of adventure design into your gaming session that allows the players a lot of freedom and mobility, not only in what their characters do during the adventure, but also in what adventures they choose to take. And for me, I like to use this as a world building tool, as a way to express the nature and the character of the world itself and the people and the creatures in it, without having to sit there and read through, pages of exposition that the players are just going to sit there and play on their phones and nod through. Or maybe the players don't necessarily want to pour through, pages of backstory and history on the world's website. So this is a way for them to experience the world firsthand as their characters are living in it. And if you can tie this into the existing history of the setting, then that's also a cool reward for players who did take the time to check out the world's website or, read the backstory that you provided for them or something like that. So all of those are some rather cool kind of advantages that I think this method of adventure design brings. Also, it lets me focus in on the types of adventures that the players actually want to do. Because if the players want to do this type of adventure, then they're probably going to be more engaged with it than if they had just showed up and I'm like, okay guys, tonight we're doing this adventure. And I'm not a big proponent of people being like, oh, that's railroady or anything like that. But I do like to give the players as much freedom as I possibly can. Another thing that this provides you with is not only in the subject matter of the adventures, but the type of adventure itself. Like maybe the players really like mystery style adventures. Like they like interacting with the NPCs and searching for clues and things like that. Like they're really, really into that, so they jump on the adventures that include that. Or maybe they really like dungeon crawls, so anytime an adventure pops up like, hey, they've just discovered a crypt or some caves or a dungeon, the players, immediately discard everything else. They're like, no, we want to go on another dungeon crawl. So what I try to do with that in that regard is I never try to populate the town board with all of the same type of adventure. Like I'm not going to send out the message and it's going to be like 4 dungeon crawl adventures and nothing else. I will use it to be like, hey, this, there's a dungeon crawl here, there's a mystery here, there is a survival, like, hex crawl here. And that way the players have a lot of say in exactly what type of adventure they want their characters to go on. And these have just been a few of the methods that I use when constructing Sandbox style campaigns. It's, I think, a pretty good method of allowing a great deal of player and character agency while allowing the game master to really focus their efforts into areas that the players are interested in, while at the same time getting to express the nature of your world in a realistic way. But those are just my thoughts on the subject. If you have any other ideas for how you run town boards or adventures or some other cool consequences you can come up with, by all means, let me know in the comment section below. If you haven't already, you can download Raven of the Scythe. It's available for free at drivethrurpg.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching.